The introduction to Psalm 139. Psalm 139 opens with one of the most intimate portraits of God's omniscience in the Bible, traditionally attributed to King David. This psalm explores the depth of God's knowledge, presence, and care for each human being. The psalmist begins by marveling at God's ability to know him completely, from his actions to his thoughts. David expresses awe that God perceives not only external deeds but also the inner motives of the heart, highlighting a relationship that transcends mere observation. Here, the foundation is laid. God's omnipresence and omniscience are not just theological ideas but living realities for the believer. This section also examines the historical context of David's life as a shepherd, warrior, and king, reflecting on how these experiences of solitude, danger, and leadership shaped his understanding of God's intimate knowledge of humanity. Furthermore, it highlights the literary beauty of the psalm, noting its poetic structure, parallelism, and vivid imagery. The opening verses invite listeners to contemplate the profound mystery of a God who knows them fully before they even act or speak, setting the tone for a journey of reflection, confession, and worship throughout the psalm. God's omniscience. David writes, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." This phrase begins a meditation on God's all-encompassing knowledge. The psalmist marvels that there is no hiding from God's awareness, whether in public or in private. Historical insights reveal that in the ancient Near East, kings and priests were often considered all-seeing or spiritually attuned. Yet David acknowledges a God far superior, whose understanding surpasses all human wisdom. In this section, we explore what it means for God to know the human heart completely. Thoughts, intentions, and desires cannot be concealed. This omniscience brings comfort to the faithful and accountability to those who stray. Psychologically, believers find solace in knowing that God comprehends their struggles, fears, and joys, validating their experiences while calling them into greater spiritual awareness. The imagery of God's knowledge penetrating darkness, both literal and metaphorical, is also discussed, connecting with themes of divine intimacy and moral insight. If you feel touched by God's intimate care, hit the like button and subscribe for more devotional journeys into the Psalms. Share this video with someone who needs to know they are fully known and fully loved. God's presence everywhere. Psalm 139 emphasizes that there is no corner of creation hidden from God. The psalmist poetically describes being unable to flee from God's presence, whether ascending to the heavens, descending into the depths, or traveling across the sea. Here, we explore the theological concept of God's omnipresence, tracing its significance in both Old and New Testament theology. Historically, this understanding provided hope to the Israelites in exile or distress, affirming that God is not distant but actively present in all circumstances. This section also highlights the practical spiritual implications. God's presence offers guidance, protection, and comfort, ensuring that believers are never abandoned, even in moments of fear or uncertainty. This universality of God's presence is interwoven with David's personal reflections, illustrating how ancient scripture communicates eternal truths in deeply personal ways. God's guidance and protection. The psalmist continues by acknowledging God's hand in guiding his life. The metaphor of God's hand symbolizes care, direction, and security, suggesting that divine oversight extends to every step of the believer's journey. Historically, this would resonate with shepherding imagery familiar to David, reflecting his early life tending sheep and learning patience, vigilance, and stewardship. This section explores how Psalm 139 reassures believers that they are under divine protection even when navigating life's uncertainties, such as conflict, moral challenges, or personal loss. The narrative highlights how understanding God's guidance fosters trust and obedience, connecting ancient wisdom to modern spiritual practice. Reflect on how God has guided your steps in life. Comment below your story of divine guidance and let others be inspired by your journey. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly Psalms, devotion. The mystery of God's creation. Psalm 139 shifts to a profound meditation on human creation. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Here, we explore the historical and theological significance of this imagery. In ancient Israel, the womb was often seen as a sacred space of God's craftsmanship. David's awe reflects a deep understanding of life as intentional, purposeful, and sacred. The section elaborates on the artistic metaphors in the psalm, portraying God as a master artisan, crafting each individual with intricate detail. Modern applications include reflections on personal identity, value, and purpose, emphasizing that every life is designed and known by God, countering feelings of insignificance or despair. Life as a sacred journey. Building upon the theme of divine craftsmanship, David recognizes that his life is a sacred journey guided by God. Every step, thought, and moment is intentional, contributing to a greater divine plan. This section draws on historical accounts of David's struggles, his battles, mistakes, and triumphs to illustrate that human life, while unpredictable, is always under God's watchful eye. The psalm invites believers to reflect on their own lives as sacred narratives, imbued with meaning even in ordinary or painful moments. The discussion emphasizes gratitude, mindfulness, and spiritual intentionality as practical responses to God's detailed care. Take a moment today to acknowledge God's hand in your life. Share this video with someone who needs reassurance that their life is divinely guided. Subscribe for more inspirational psalm stories. The reality of divine justice. Psalm 139 also turns to the theme of justice. The psalmist appeals to God to examine the wicked and protect the righteous. This section examines the historical context of justice in David's time, where kings were responsible for moral leadership and protection of the people. David's prayer reflects the belief that God sees beyond appearances, discerning the heart and intentions of all people. The section also discusses the balance between mercy and justice in God's character, demonstrating that divine insight brings accountability as well as compassion. The call to personal integrity. Reflecting on God's omniscience and justice, David emphasizes the importance of personal integrity. The psalm challenges believers to align their actions with God's knowledge and care, not out of fear but out of gratitude for being fully known. This section connects historical practice to modern life, encouraging ethical living, self-reflection, and humility. Through storytelling and examples, it shows how awareness of God's presence transforms relationships, decisions, and character. If you're inspired to live with integrity and embrace God's presence, like and share this video. Join our community for weekly psalms, reflections, and encouragement. Worship as a response. Psalm 139 concludes with awe and worship, recognizing that knowledge of God's presence, craftsmanship, and justice naturally leads to praise. This section explores worship as a response to understanding God's intimate care, emphasizing that devotion is not ritual alone but heartfelt recognition of God's active role in life. Historical insights illustrate how psalmody shaped Israelite worship and continues to influence contemporary devotional practices. The section highlights practical applications, such as meditation, prayer, and gratitude exercises. The personal invitation. The final section invites the listener to internalize Psalm 139 as a personal call. David's words encourage a deepened relationship with God, affirming that every thought, action, and emotion is seen, valued, and understood. The section emphasizes reflection, prayer, and transformation, inviting viewers to engage actively with the psalm in their daily lives. It closes with encouragement to trust, rejoice, and live in the assurance of God's intimate knowledge and enduring presence.